Hey everybody, welcome to a Facebook Live event that Brady is very excited to bring you this morning on a very busy morning. To go ahead, I'll introduce myself. I'm JJ Jamflone. I am the project manager of the podcast Red, Blue, and Brady, which I deeply hope all of you have been listening to. And I'm really happy here to be joined today by my frequent co-host, Kelly Sampson, who is senior counsel at Brady and the head of our racial justice initiatives. I'm also, of course, with Loey, who is joining us by phone. So unfortunately, you all don't get to see his very charming face. He is the vice president of legal at Brady. And then, of course, Chris Brown, our fearless leader, president of Brady, is with us today. So I want to go ahead and jump right into this and say, hey, Chris, Loey, Kelly, what happened today?
Well, today was a banner day, JJ, and it's a pleasure to be with you and, of course, with Kelly and John as well. Today, the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, held a press conference at 11:30 and announced that she had filed a complaint in the Supreme Court of New York alleging a variety of actions against the NRA. There are 18 counts in the complaint. And as Kelly and John can probably attest from great speed reading skills, it's a long complaint because there's a lot to cover. And we've known this. The complaint is against the NRA, but the complaint is also against 4 of its current and former officers, including a man we know well at Brady, Wayne LaPierre, because we have been talking about the kinds of malfeasance, the kinds of indicia of fraud that really is the center of this complaint. And it goes into great detail. We know that the Attorney General in New York has been investigating the NRA for some time now because the NRA is chartered back in the 1800s in the state of New York. And the Attorney General is protecting the citizens of New York to ensure that an entity that seeks nonprofit status actually works in the public interest. That's part of their charter. And so the epicenter of this complaint is the kinds of activity, if any one of these activities were true, that should really deny the NRA its nonprofit status. I'm so pleased at the incredible public service that is reflected in this complaint. You can tell from all of the details here, they have done a ton of work, a lot of discovery to find all of the different kinds of malfeasance that has happened over many years. And the result of that is an organization that has operated in the interest of a handful of individuals, has taken money away from dues paying members and used it for their own personal gain, and really is exactly how Tish, the Attorney General, ultimately concluded her statement today. This case proves that nobody is above the law, including the NRA. And I think given where we are today in America, that's something that all of us should celebrate.
Yeah, I think that that's the best quick summation of, as you said, I think like 160-page document and, a very detailed case that they're bringing. But I do just want to throw a quick note out there to all of our listeners that if you have any questions, comments, or concerns as we go along, we do have a question and answer portion of this interview available. So go ahead and type your questions in and send them, and we will try to get to them as we go. So, because I know just from listening to you, Chris, I've got 1,001 follow-up questions already, and I help design Run of Show. So I even have more questions. So please feel free to add things to this Q&A box as we go. I was wondering too, if we can maybe pivot to Loey, how Chris went into this a little bit, but how this whole thing actually works. How does this pan out in the long term? And, why with New York bringing this, hasn't Brady been fighting for this for a long time? And I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, as Chris said, the gist of the New York Attorney General's action is that Wayne LaPierre, in particular, but others at the NRA, were essentially using the NRA as their personal piggy bank. to live really lives of the rich and famous, using the money that had gone to the NRA to ostensibly do the charitable purposes of the NRA. It's important to know that what we're talking about is not based on the fact that the NRA does, horrific damage to America through its work. And that's just an important point. The Attorney General made that. Her complaint is not, a big part of the argument that we've made against the NRA, which is their policies and their influence on Capitol Hill have cost, untold American lives because they prevented gun policies. This is because these allegations are that they're, in a way, crooks, taking money and using it for their personal purposes. So, if this is the first stage of the case, the Attorney General has filed a complaint. She will then have an opportunity to prove her case and to try it. And if she prevails, and it certainly seems like there's a strong case to be made from the complaint, but also from public reports that have been coming out for over a year, the court can award the relief that she's requesting, which includes dissolving the NRA, forcing Wayne LaPierre to pay back the money that he took, and a number of other conditions. And I should note that also today, the Attorney General of the District of Columbia has filed a separate lawsuit against the NRA Foundation, which, unlike the NRA, which is incorporated in New York, the NRA Foundation is incorporated in Washington, D.C. And he also makes a strong case, and that the NRA Foundation is basically supporting some of the misdeeds of the NRA. And so that could result in the NRA Foundation also being dissolved, essentially. Now, I think it's important to know that we at Brady filed a complaint or a letter with the IRS, federal government, in October of 2019, arguing that the NRA's federal tax status should be revoked. And our point was that in addition to, basically taking the NRA's money, as Wayne LaPierre and others have done, they also are not even doing what they say they're supposed to be doing. The NRA says they are there to fight for gun owners. And they did, to some extent, back in the 19th century and at least the early part of the 20th century. But now what they do is they fight for the gun industry, and they take money from the gun industry, and then they basically work to expand the profits of the gun industry, often at the expense of gun owners, and certainly not in the interest of gun owners. And most gun owners support background checks on gun sales because they want, to make sure that guns are not in the wrong hands. But the NRA, of course, fights that because they're fighting for gun industry profits. So that was our argument. And, if the IRS agrees with us, then NRA gets a federal tax status taken away. And that's just important to know, because one thing that maybe could happen is the NRA could try to get up and incorporate in another state that's more friendly. But even if they do that, if they lose their federal tax status from our complaint, then they can only get so much in the way of benefits in another state. They certainly can't get federal tax benefits.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. So, because I think what probably people are hearing, especially me, who like whenever I hear the phrase like IRS or taxes, I immediately just get really nervous and assume that I'm not going to understand a very complicated process. That essentially why this is so important is I think that the NRA is finally being, in a very public and legal way, called to task for a lot of bad behavior that a lot of gun violence prevention orgs have been talking about for a very long time. And so I'd like to open the floor up to everybody, but especially I think Kelly and Chris, just because I know we've talked about this before. You know, what are some of Brady's large complaints about how the NRA operates as a nonprofit, or some of the things that the NRA has advocated for that we personally as an organization feel is not actually up to them representing responsible gun owners?
I can kind of kick that off, and I'm sure Kelly can add a lot more detail. But basically, when you think about what is supposed to be conveyed with the nonprofit status, what does that mean, and what is that? As John said, I mean, first of all, in any organization that has successfully obtained nonprofit status, you're supposed to be acting in the public interest, right? And why is that? Well, it's because you get tax breaks, and your donors get big tax breaks associated with making contributions to you. So it's supposed to spur people through philanthropy to make tax-free donations to an organization. Now, the NRA's charter says that what it's supposed to be focused on is safety and awareness, all of the things that, frankly, we at Brady also agree should be undertaken to make sure that those who are purchasing guns are reasonably trained about those guns, are made aware of the risks of having guns, and engage in things like safe storage. That's what our entire End Family Fire campaign is about. And just as an example of what I mean, and I promise I'll get to finish the answer to your question, JJ, but when we launched our End Family Fire campaign at Brady, we thought, what better way to actually join forces with other organizations in this space than on this campaign, which is about gun owners and safe storage of guns in the home to prevent the tragedy of family fire. So I actually sent a letter to Wayne LaPierre, and we reached out to the NRA. They had zero interest in joining with us on a safe storage campaign. And I really think that says a lot about how far Wayne LaPierre took the NRA off course from its mission. And very little of their dollars are actually spent on anything having to do with their charter. And that's a problem. You can't do that when you're a nonprofit. You say what you're supposed to be doing that's in the public interest, and then you go about raising money tax-free to further that purpose. They have so far strayed for that purpose that if they were to file a charter, if you're looking at the Tish James complaint today, what it should say is, please give us nonprofit status so we can collect dues and buy vacation properties and jets and fancy clothes at Beverly Hills boutiques. I think I'm not alone as an American in being deeply offended that that is how they chose to operate and act, not just over a period of recent years. This goes back decades. And that's why I'm so proud of the work that's been done here. And also, as John noted, by the AG and the District of Columbia, and perhaps others as well.
And if I could chime in there and kind of reiterate a point that both Chris and John have made, the complaint coming out of New York is separate and apart from the NRA's mission. In fact, it's almost a way of saying you aren't doing your mission, which is what Chris was saying. So if I could use a visual of a Venn diagram, the left circle would be all of the financial issues and all of the self-dealing and the fraud and the abuse of the nonprofit status. And then the other circle, which would be separate and apart, would be Brady's issues around how the NRA is distorting gun policy, is making, not acting in the public interest as a nonprofit should do. And where they cross is the ways in which they're abusing their nonprofit status for their own self-dealing. But we're already seeing reports from NRA supporters and other gun rights supporters trying to pass this off, trying to characterize the Attorney General as some gun-grabbing anti-NRA fanatic who doesn't actually care about the tax status. And just want to be clear that that is not true. There is obviously a place where the complaint crosses with the work that we're doing, but this is about Wayne LaPierre and other executives abusing the status that they have from the state, which is a privilege, not a right. And it's not about some effort to somehow find a back way to invalidate the Second Amendment. So that's just something that we'll keep clarifying, because this is not saying that the Second Amendment is under attack. It's the NRA's malfeasance, which is being targeted here.
And JJ, I think what Kelly just said is so important. And I know that not everyone has time to read a detailed complaint with this many pages, but I would challenge it.
Fun, if I must say.
It is pretty fun. Even skimming it, you get a lot out of it. And what you get out in a 15-minute read of it is so many detailed facts of malfeasance that there is just no possible way an attorney general acting in the public interest could do anything but bring this complaint. And I think that's a really important point. She has a public duty to ensure that nonprofits operating in the state through a charter actually operate consistent with law. And it's clear, and based on what are in this complaint, that has not been happening.
Well,
and to follow, Kelly's point, the people who should be sort of most angry about this malfeasance are NRA supporters, because they're the ones who've been paying dues in order to pay for Wayne LaPierre's vacations and fancy wardrobe. That, isn't why they gave money to the NRA. We may disagree with the reasons that motivated them to give money to the NRA, but it certainly wasn't that.
Yeah, there wasn't a vacation fund GoFundMe that people paid into.
And JJ, I know we need to move on to our next question, but I think John's point there is very profound. And actually, I can say it makes me really sad. I mean, I'm the president of Brady. Jim and Sarah Brady, when they started down the road of trying to get background checks passed, I know that they were completely shocked that the NRA stood in their way. And that's one thing, right? And that goes against everything that I think most Americans believe in. But beyond that, their basic charter is to ensure that gun owners are educated about the risks and safety around firearms, and to provide an opportunity through shooting ranges and other kinds of things that they operate to allow gun owners to experience, using guns. This is not what they have done consistent with their charter. And the people who have really been hurt by that are gun owners themselves. And I think that, ultimately Brady, we take action, not sides, for a reason. We want to represent gun owners and non-gun owners in this cause, and certainly understand that many gun owners may feel, as John said, rightly upset by the NRA, and we want you to know we agree with you, and it doesn't have to be this way. And that's what really Brady has been fighting for all this time.
Well, sorry. This is the trouble when everyone's been apart from COVID so long. I'm just so excited to talk and see other humans that I'm stepping on everyone. But please, Kelly, go right ahead.
I was just going to also add on to John's point about NRA members having the standing to be the most upset. I also just want to point out that, as Chris said, if you look through the complaint and just skim it, I also think to that point about members being upset, it also shows the hypocrisy of Wayne LaPierre and also other executives, because there's this trope of it's the elites are coming for your guns, and it's the elites who are against the NRA. And they use that talking point a lot about how they are the real Americans and the elites are the ones coming after them. But then the facts betray a very elite lifestyle of lavish vacations and multi-million-dollar homes and very fancy shopping sprees and things like that. So I think it also, to the point about members being upset, if I were reading that and I had heard this person talking to me for years about the elites who wanted to come from my lifestyle, it would be very upsetting to see how elite they were really living on my dime and on the money that I had given them to protect my interests. So I think that's just another reason why members should probably be very upset.
Well, and I can say I spend a fair amount of time, just because of the nature of my job, on social media. So I spend a lot of time on Brady's social media, which is at Brady Buzz. Everyone should be following us. Everyone should be following at Chris Brown on Twitter as well, because Chris has great tweets. And I'm not just saying that because you can see me, but one of the things that I've seen people even like tweet to us or tweet around us is also the sort of racialized rhetoric that you've seen on like NRA social media, I think increasingly, especially honestly in the last 6 months, but has been present for quite a while, that has positioned certain Americans with access to firearms as committing crimes, and that white Americans need to arm themselves to prevent crimes from being happening, when it seems like these white elites and the NRA were committing crimes this whole time. And I'm wondering if we can talk about that just a little bit. I know it's complicated, but I think it needs to be drawn out.
I mean, I think that's a great point. And it goes to, and this is, again, just want to clarify, this is Brady talking, this is not part of the complaint.
Yeah.
But the NRA has been pushing a worldview more recently under Wayne LaPierre's leadership that is very much a sort of dystopian Hobbesian view where life is nasty, brutish, and short, and you need to get a firearm to defend yourself. And in putting that out there, they've been using a lot of dog whistles, and in some cases not dog whistles, very explicit racial terms, saying that there are thugs out in Chicago and that you need to be able to protect yourself. And I think calling Barack Obama a demographically representative president. And those are just some of the ones at the top of my mind. But even I remember before COVID, lockdown started to happen, there were all of these videos that were saying, the looters are coming for your toilet paper. And all of these little tropes and kind of cutesy language are very rooted in a long tradition in this country of connecting Black people for the most part, but also other groups, to criminality and danger. And the NRA has used that trope to push people to be against gun laws, to push this trope that you have to protect yourself. And the irony is that from what we've seen in the complaint, they have been engaging in illegal behavior every single day. And so I think that just goes to show the sinister and malicious worldview to be pushing people into criminalizing whole swaths of people when you yourself are engaged in crime. And that's just one avenue of how they're operating.
Yeah, I just found it so compelling when the Attorney General referred to what they were doing is that they were looting the NRA. And I was like, but they've said, I know that you've used this very intentional language in your messaging before, and it's incredibly unfair to your followers, as I believe Chris has pointed out. It's incredibly unethical, as Kelly, I think you've pointed out. And while that's not part of the complaint, I think, as you've pointed out with the Venn diagram, it's present. And I wonder, Loie, if you can even talk about that a little bit as someone who's been fighting this fight for a long time.
Sure. So, first, listening to Kelly, one thing that comes to mind is the Bob Dylan line, throw a little and steal a little and they throw you in jail, steal a lot and they make you a king. It sort of gets to sort of broader racial justice issues that, we hear stories of people having extremely lengthy prison sentences for pretty small crimes. And, here we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. There have not been criminal charges brought against Wayne LaPierre. No one, future. But these are vast crimes, far more than than any of the sorts of people that he is lashing out at in his rhetoric.
And the only other point I'd like to add, sorry, JJ, because I know you want us to move on, but there's an old expression that when I was younger, I didn't understand as well, but I really understand it better as an adult, someone more seasoned in the world and every day living in America. And that is this expression, a fish rots from the head down. And what that really means is that you can't expect to have a good culture or organization when the people at the top are poisoned. And here you really see evidence of that. And I think what Kelly pointed out at the beginning of this conversation, the sort of Venn diagram really proves the case. There has been gross malfeasance, and these are allegations, but there's a lot of evidence to back that up. And we have also seen an organization that with Wayne LaPierre's leadership over the last few decades has completely strayed from its origins and actually done significant public harm. These two things are linked. There's a reason for that. And if you have someone who is operating strictly in their own personal interests, motivated exclusively by greed, it's not a surprise that you see this kind of result. It's terribly sad. People have lost their lives because of this organization and the approach it's taken to stand in the way of the most basic and common sense gun laws that are supported by the vast majority of Americans. And that indeed is a terrible thing to see. But the Attorney General here has been very clear. What she's going after is the fraud, the malfeasance, and those actions by those individuals is at the root of this case.
I do.
And I do think that overriding greed sort of ties through a lot of the NRA's problems, both its policies and the looting, because the NRA made a decision at some point a few decades ago that they were not going to fight for the interests of everyday gun owners, but they were going to fight for the gun industry. And, I think the reason probably was that's where the money is. I mean, it's $1 billion industry. Let's take the money from them and let's fight for their interests, rather than, ordinary gun owners who may want, marksmanship and gun safety courses. That's not as lucrative.
I was just going to add on to John's point with the Bob Dylan lyric about, if you steal a little, I don't remember the lyrics, but I know the point, and it's one I've seen in other places around the
I'll
idea.
send you the song afterwards, Kelly.
The idea of, for lack of a better term, I know this term is loaded, but white collar crime being treated differently. And I think just one other point I wanted to make on that front around racial justice, the NRA and their worldview, is that a lot of the laws that they've been pushing and supporting, like Stand Your Ground and other laws, have this worldview where someone who is trying to steal from you or attack your property or come into your home, they're pushing for the idea that we as American citizens would have the right to become the prosecutor and the executioner right on site. And if you feel threatened, even for property, that you would have the right to shoot that person. And so I think the irony is that this whole time they've been engaging in behavior that is much more far-reaching and much more damaging. And we are not saying that that is worthy of being shot. I think we're just pointing out the irony there, that it's almost like the idea of the scary, Black person who's going to come to your neighborhood and steal your TV is fueling Stand Your Ground laws and all these other heinous laws that have cost people their lives. And at the same time, they're stealing millions and millions of dollars and will be treated with respect and dignity under the law. So I think that's just another way why this is so frustrating to watch the hypocrisy happening.
No, I think that's an amazing point. And I'm seeing we're starting to get questions in. So I just want to go ahead and flag everyone who's listening right now. If you have any final questions, if you can submit them right now, that would be really helpful, because otherwise you're just going to have to deal with some indecision and questions, and, you know, call into the podcast later on this week to ask more questions, or follow us on social, or find us online, you know, at bradyunited.org. You know, there's other ways to get your questions to us, but if you want these brilliant people to answer them right now in live time, now is the moment. So while people are sending them in, I have a really important question, which is, I'm going to open to all of you, which is, you know, where do we go from here? So this was obviously brought early this morning. It doesn't mean that the NRA is dissolved. What does it mean, though? Where do we go from here, and how can people help Brady help people across the U.S. By calling the NRA into account?
This is just the beginning of a process. I'll let Kelly and John speculate in terms of time, but the complaint was literally just filed, and under the legal system in the US, the defendants are entitled to their day in court. So I would expect this would be a process to go on over a period of many, many months before a decision is actually made. I think it is important, as it always has been, but especially at this time, for Americans to raise their voices. And certainly Brady will be looking at this case closely, looking at the complaint that was also filed by the Attorney General in the District of Columbia. And there will be many moments of activation to share our support for these individuals, these public servants who are really exposing much of the malfeasance that we know has been at the heart of this organization for a long time. So please join us and follow us at bradyunited.org to get information and sign petitions and show your support for these efforts, because ultimately this did not happen overnight. The fact that this complaint was filed today and that the DC Attorney General filed this complaint today is the culmination of a huge amount of activism, of work by Brady and others in the gun violence prevention movement to expose exactly what we see in this complaint. It's a long read. None of it to us in the movement is a surprise. We've known it, but now we have a vehicle to actually hold them to account.
And one way that you can join your voice, you know, right on this point, is join our petition to the IRS. And before we filed it with the IRS, and this is the petition asking that the NRA be investigated and have their, you know, federal tax-exempt status revoked. Before we filed it, we got Americans around the country to join us and to file it with us. We'll do that again, and we'll seek more people to, you know, add their voices, and we will, you know, submit them to the IRS. And if the IRS could take action, that would be, you know, even more far-reaching, because that would affect the NRA even if they decide to move to a more friendly state.
And just one other thing I would add about supporting this moving forward is, I think this filing today shows the importance of voting down ballot and how important it is to vote in local elections. And obviously, I'm not saying that voting is a magic pill that solves every problem. Absolutely not. But the fact is, Letitia James is an elected official and is using her platform and her obligation to the public to act in the public interest. And so Brady actually has a campaign, the Voting Saves Lives campaign, which you can find on our website. And if you haven't already looked there, there are a lot of actions you can take to help preserve access to the ballot so that we can elect more politicians like Letitia James to act in our interest and reflect our voices and preferences at all the various public agencies, including attorney general's offices around the country. So I think this just goes to show how important it is to pay attention to every single elected official, because they do have a lot of power to act in our interest.
Yeah, I think Chris, Sarah Brady had a great quote about that you reference a lot in particular.
Which one? You
The
mean,
voting them out. There's so many, but Sarah was pithy, but I do like that one quite a bit.
yeah, if you can't change the laws, change the lawmakers, which I think you've demonstrated time and again is true and certainly will be true this November.
Yeah. All right, I think we have time for exactly one question left. Well, like one extra one. This is coming in with sort of another way that the NRA is betraying its members and all gun owners is by blocking passage of safety standards for firearms. And I bring up this question in particular because I know Loie and I just had a conversation about this yesterday. So it's a little unfair of me. But in blocking repeal of the law granting the gun industry immunity from most types of civil lawsuits. And this person in particular, Griffin, wanted to know if we had any comments about those issues. And I know Loie has comments, but I'm wondering about the two of you, just because I think that that's actually an excellent question to end on, just to really hammer home, I think, what I've learned since coming to Brady, and I think a lot, unfortunately, gun owners who support the NRA learned today, which is the NRA hasn't been supporting their best interest. The heads of the NRA have been supporting themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just weigh in, and I think the floor should go to John and Kelly on this. But there is a law, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. It's a mouthful, PLACA, that was passed by Congress. It was a backroom deal brokered by the NRA that ostensibly sought to provide broad immunity to the NRA from lawsuits. Of course, thanks to John and Kelly and others in the legal team, we've poked a lot of holes in that law. But certainly, no, that is not in the public interest. And I do hope that with this election coming up and more champions of gun violence prevention in Congress, we can make a material change and have that law repealed. We've been working on legislation in the House to do just that. And we know we have incredible champions to do it. For too long, the NRA behind the scenes, they do most of this without telling people because they're not acting in the interests of gun owners. They're doing it at the behest of industry. Has put these kinds of protections in place that only one industry in America has, and that's the gun industry. And the people who pay the price are average, everyday Americans who live in a society that is riddled with gun violence. So yes, I would love to see that change. And I think we should all feel very hopeful if we do the right things that we can make that happen.
And, another big change would be to allow for federal product safety regulation. Guns are the most dangerous consumer product on the market, but they're the only one that is exempt from federal product safety oversight. And that was another thing that the NRA, prevailed on Congress to get. So as a result, if you have a BB gun or a bunk bed or a child's toy that could be made safer, federal government can require companies to make the product safer and to put in safety features. They can't do that with guns, and that's outrageous, and that hurts gun owners and their families. It makes the products that they care about less safe and more dangerous to them and their families and their visitors. So, that's something where gun owners should wake up and say, wait a minute, that hurts me. And the NRA has been fighting for this against my interests. That's another reason they should be leaving the NRA.
Kelly, any final remarks? Do you want to bring us home? Just putting you on the spot as a co-host. I feel like I'm allowed to do that to you now.
The only thing is, as John was talking, it just reminded me of like not ghost guns, wrong technology, smart guns, and other technological advances that would also just make guns safer and better to use and more consistent with 2020 technology. And that's another area where the NRA has been in opposition and pushing back against the interest of gun owners who would benefit, especially from something like a smart gun, which would cut down dramatically probably on suicides and family fire. So yeah, I just totally agree with what John was saying there.
Well, on that note, I want to thank the three of you for being here. I want to thank all of the people who tuned in to listen to us live today for a very exciting Thursday morning. Now, actually, afternoon. Time has changed. You know, Brady's work in Congress, courts, and communities across the country couldn't happen without the support of everybody here who's listening and participating. So it really means a lot. And again, if you want to find out more about what Brady is doing and will continue to do, you can find us at bradyunited.org, on social at BradyBuzz, and you can always check out the podcast, new episodes every week, which is Red, Blue, and Brady, available wherever your podcasts are preferred. All right. And on that note, I think we can all bid adieu. So
Thank you, JJ. Adieu to you.
Thanks, JJ.
Thanks, JJ.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.